Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. What have you to say regarding the $14 billion? For weeks there have been discussions with the provinces, and since you're stating exactly the same thing, we do not feel that there has been any progress. Are they more prepared to accept this $14 billion with the conditions attached to it? Yes, we did discuss and we did negotiate this week as a group and also bilaterally. And the provinces have understood that we are extremely flexible in what we propose. At the same time, we expect that the federal money that we'll be giving them will be used for the purpose of restarting the economy, such as more spacing in the daycare centers, more individual protection equipment or personal protection equipment. So I can yes answer that negotiations are going full steam, and we will be providing the money soon. Yesterday, you mentioned the situation in the long-term care homes and failure on the part of provinces. Do the premiers agree with your analysis? And can you give some guarantee regarding the long-term care home that there will be a lack of staffing while the transition takes place? Answer. Yeah, we discussed this regarding the services for staff and from staff and vulnerable people. Everybody agrees that we have lessons to draw from from the way things happened. Everybody agrees on this point, and we will be working together. Regarding transition, over the last 2 months, outstanding efforts have been made by our Canadian Armed Forces. And in some of those homes, the situation has been stabilized and procedures have been decided for the purpose of enabling them to move from the red code situation to the yellow, orange, and yellow situation, and they will now stay until the situation is back to green, actually. And we will be receiving the help of the Red Cross in order to continue gradually guarantee that nobody be left in a difficult situation.
Obviously, we talked about the fact that we need to work together to do better, all levels of government in the future on supporting our seniors. We've continued to highlight there are challenges around personnel, there are challenges around structures, and we're going to keep working together. In regards to the military stepping back and allowing the Canadian Red Cross to move into the elder care centres in Quebec, we're making sure that the work that has been done over the past few months, that is moving situations from crisis of a condition red in many of the CHSLDs to being greens, we're making sure that the military does not leave any situation until it has been stabilized in the CHSLD and the Red Cross personnel are available to come in and keep supporting.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Murad Hemadi, The Logic. Line open.
Prime Minister, it's been 14 days that the government was working on.
I'm sorry, I'm not really hearing you particularly well. Can you maybe speak closer to the handset?
Prime Minister, let me try that again. It's been 42 days since you announced the government was working on changes to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, including the
I think we might have lost you.
Okay, operator, if we can take the next call, please.
Well, I can address the changes to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. We brought in place the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy in order to help businesses like here at Big Rig Brewery to bring people back on so that we could restart the economy in a safe and efficient way. We know that many businesses are down in their revenues and therefore needed help. But we want people to stay connected to their jobs, and we want the economy to get rolling again. So we saw the wage subsidy as an essential tool in helping people through a very tough time. As the economy starts to pick up, though, we don't want people to resist growth or resist hiring new people because they don't want to cross a threshold that will remove that wage subsidy. So we're very much looking at how to ensure that that wage subsidy won't be a disencouragement to grow and to hire new people. Those are the things that we're working on now. We hope to have more to say soon.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Sorry, still here?
Oh, sorry, Murad.
Mr. Nadi, follow up.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't sure whether I was still connected. Okay, great. Thank you. Also, Prime Minister, the Federal Ethics Commissioner is investigating Canada's former ambassador to the U.S., David McNaughton, for possibly violating conflict of interest rules in his role at Palantir Canada. Have you and Mr. McNaughton ever talked about Palantir or its work?
No, we have not.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Catherine Lévesque, La Presse canadienne. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, monsieur.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Going back to the $14 billion, you said that you've had bilateral talks with the provincial and territorial governments. Does that mean that you contemplate possibly separate agreements with the separate provinces or territories? Answer. All provinces and territories have specific situations, which explains why we had to hold bilateral talks on top of the more general pan-Canadian agreement with those governments. And we are continuing these talks and the bilateral talks, and if provinces or territories reach an agreement with the federal government, we will be able to send the money as quickly as possible and in order for Canadians to receive help throughout the country to receive the aid. And it is urgent to provide the money as quickly as possible and will not wait until the last province or territories signs the agreement. We have vulnerable people in Canada. We have various local councils, which municipal council which need our help quickly, and we'll do all we can to send it quick. So I understand that there will be separate agreements. And you seem to say yesterday that this money will be used for. Will you be adding some? Will you have some strings attached, or more strings attached for the use of that money? Well, answer. Within the amount of $14 billion, we have a number of requirements. For instance, speaking of vulnerable categories, we know that elderly people are particularly vulnerable, so we want this money to be used in priority for them in the long-term care homes. But there are some provinces which have already invested for the protection of our elderly people and who want to use that money for other categories of vulnerable people who are homeless or other categories again. And so we, within that framework of protection of vulnerable people, we will be giving flexibility to the provinces, but at the same time targeting people who are more vulnerable throughout the country.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Marie Lastel, Le Devoir.
Marie Lastel, Le Devoir. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Let me go back to your statement, your joint statement together with the provinces regarding racism. In this declaration, there's a mention of systemic racism. So, speaking of systemic racism in Canada, why is there something missing in this respect? Is it that you do not want to talk about systemic racism? From the beginning, I say how important it is to recognize and acknowledge the phenomenon of systemic racism in our country. And this is an important thing that we have to acknowledge if we want to move forward. And we made a unanimous statement with the provinces and territories. And this is a strong statement which demonstrates that we do recognize that there is a problem and that we have to take action. So this is what we'll be doing. But there hasn't been consensus regarding the use of the words systemic racism and I will let you understand why some provinces didn't want to have the phrase systemic racism and have it recognized. We want to have it recognized so that we can fight it much better.
We demonstrated that in every province of the country, in every territory, we are committed to fighting against racism, to ensuring that people don't face discrimination based on their ethnic background or their identity, whether they're racialized or Indigenous or of any sort of background. There was not consensus on using the phrase systemic discrimination or systemic racism. I have been crystal clear that the federal government recognizes it in order to be able to better address it. But I think people have seen that it's still a strong statement that needs to be followed up by concrete actions, and I look forward to taking those actions in partnership with provinces and territories and on our own.
Mary, suivi.
Thank you. That's a strong statement, but the term systemic racism isn't yet properly defined. You have been passionate about this in the past. So what message do you think it sends when the provinces can't agree on how to use those words and can't even agree to condemn the fact that there is systemic racism in Canada? Isn't it disappointing that you can't make a joint statement with the premiers? I think it highlights how much work needs to be done across Canada to fight systemic racism. And there are still people and institutions in this country who have challenges to recognize. But we'll continue working on this because a strong position against racism is valid and important for my premiers. And as for myself, I'm ready to go much further. That's also what we'll be doing with our actions, and we'll continue working on helping others to come to the understanding that there's a great deal that needs to change in this country, especially in the fight against systemic racism, which exists in all parts of Canada. Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. Some people in Quebec are feeling vulnerable because the army will leave before the Red Cross is ready to move in. So why not wait for the Red Cross to be entirely ready before withdrawing the troops? Very soon, we will be sending 150 members of the Canadian Red Cross who will replace many of the armed forces troops. At the same time, I would point out that the Army was there to help bring the long-term care homes from red to green. They've done this for 47 care homes, and they'll do it for another 4 or 5 before withdrawing. They will not leave any of the long-term care homes before the situation is stable and condition green, to make sure that we don't leave anyone in the lurch. We promise to be there to support our seniors in Quebec, and we will be there to do that. The Red Cross has been taking part in training those troops. They're the ones who trained the troops before they went in April. And with them, our seniors in Quebec will be in extremely good hands.
The Canadian Armed Forces will not leave any centre in Quebec that has not gone from a red condition to a green condition. We need to stabilize the situation everywhere those Canadian Armed Forces are, and nobody will pull out any military personnel until the centres in which they are fully stabilized. We're also sending in Canadian Red Cross members, 150 in the coming week, 750 more in the weeks after that, to ensure that right across the province, people are getting the support they need. I can highlight that it was actually the Red Cross that participated in training up the armed forces when they first went in April. So Quebecers will be in very good hands, and we're not going to leave anyone who's in a precarious situation by pulling out the armed forces in the wrong place.
Au sujet de la subvention salariale, ça fait 3 vendredis de fil.
On the wage subsidy, this is the third Friday you've been promoting it. Your government is feeling that there's not enough take-up. Could this be the 30% revenue drop level? Some people have seen their revenues drop by 28 or 29%. Some are just around 30% and may lose the access. Is it the right thing to do to penalize these businesses? This is a measure that has helped large numbers of people who had to close during the pandemic. It's helped them rehire their workers and get back to work. We do recognize that there's a potential disincentive to growth because people don't want to go past the 70% revenue level, the 70% of normal activity. We certainly don't want to hinder economic revitalization, and we're seeing how we can amend the program to make it possible for people to continue to grow, rehire people, and to know that the wage subsidy will help them be part of an economic revitalization that is strong.
At a time where the economy was shut down. As it begins to reopen, as things start up again, we don't want the wage subsidy to be a brake on growth or on rehiring, and we don't want people who get close to that 70% of business as usual mark to have to sort of slow down and not grow because if they lose that wage subsidy, they're in big trouble. That's why we're looking at modifying it to make sure that people can continue to benefit from the wage subsidy even as their businesses grow in the right way, recognizing that we are not in normal times right now, that Canadians and businesses continue to need support in order to get us through this pandemic, and as we have been from the beginning, this government will be there for them.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. The volunteer program you announced this week, it's being run by the We charity. Can you tell us how much We is getting paid to run this program? Can you also explain why you went with them, why you didn't open this up to a competition for other groups?
We've launched an extremely ambitious program to get young people serving in their communities, young people helping out during this time of COVID, where we recognize that the usual job opportunities, the usual volunteering opportunities are simply not there. We're going to create opportunities for tens of thousands of young people right across the country to work with organizations large and small, in communities large and small right across the country. In order to do that, we needed to have a partner to help establish the networks and to deliver that with all partners across the country. And as the public service dug into it, they came back with only one organization that was capable of networking and organizing and delivering this program on the scale that we needed it, and that was the We program. We work with them in order to do this. We're making sure that their costs are covered, but they are not making any profits on this. Our focus is on helping kids get those opportunities that they need. We is a great organization that has done that in many ways and many times over the past years, and we're pleased to be partnering with them.
Do you know what the costs are? And also, you and your family work with the We charity. Is there not a perception of conflict there, or at least favoritism in going with this organization?
This is one of the reasons why we leaned heavily on the public service to try and find different ways of delivering this, and they came back and demonstrated that really the WE organization is the only organization in Canada that has the scale and the ability to deliver volunteer opportunities for young people right across the country at all levels of organizations. Yes, I have worked with WE in the past because I believe strongly in promoting opportunities for young people. I've appeared in events with them, voluntarily, of course, and have done that with many great businesses and organizations across the country that I believe in, that I think we need to support. And I will continue to do so, as will my family.
I believe that the WE organization has the capacity to deliver a very ambitious program that will help young people be involved in their communities across Canada. It was the only organization that the public service found had that ability, the ability to deliver the program. In all parts of Canada, they will not make any profits out of this. They do very good work. They have been doing very good work with young people for years. You know how much I'm involved with young people. I have worked with WE a number of times in my career. I've done events with them because I profoundly believe in helping young people become independent and active members of society. I'll be continuing to work with them very respectfully and rigorously. Monsieur le Premier Ministre.
Risk of closing permanently because of a loss of income, and the vast majority are not eligible for federal COVID-19 funding. They're pleading for help. They've written your office twice, and they haven't received the changes they're looking for. So are you considering any type of specific funding that'll help these veteran centers, or are you willing to let these legions close?
We've been working from the beginning with organizations across the country that have faced challenges because of COVID-19. Obviously, with the wage subsidy, with the emergency business account, with the CERB, there have been many, many supports for Canadians, but there are smaller organizations, service organizations, and legions that function largely on a volunteer basis, that get their revenue by renting out their halls for smaller events that haven't been happening, that are going through a very difficult time right now. We know that, we hear that, and we are working with the Minister of Veterans Affairs and other officials to try and ensure that we are supporting these organizations that are so important, not just for veterans, but for their communities as well.
We recognize that in spite of the assistance we've given to so many organizations and groups across Canada with the wage subsidy, with the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, with the Canadian Emergency Business Account, there are still organizations that work or depend on volunteers, have very little revenue, and that revenue often comes from renting out their halls to other organizations, for example, and they're not functioning. They're not able to do this kind of thing during the pandemic, so we need to support them. The Minister of Veterans Affairs is working with others to see how we can support these organizations who are so important to our veterans and also to our communities.
Writing that letter yesterday, basically disagreeing or opposing with your strategy on how to get Mr. Kovrig and Spavor released in China. How does this lack of unity at home weaken Canada's negotiating position with Beijing over this matter?
I think I've been very clear on this, that Canada continues to put the safety and security of Canadians at the very top of our priorities. We are working actively in many ways on the return of the two Michaels. And as a democracy, as a country that encourages freedom of expression, there are always going to be different perspectives on what a government should do and how a government should do it. I very much respect those eminent Canadians, even as I disagree with them. But I think it is a hallmark of a strong and free society that we can have big debates about really important issues, while at the same time a government can be absolutely unequivocal about our approach to this issue. Je pense que c'est un signe de santé d'une démocratie.
I believe it's the sign of a healthy democracy. We have different points of views on important issues. But as a government, we have been extremely clear that the safety and security of Canadians is our priority. We will continue working very hard to bring back the two Michaels who have been arbitrarily detained in China, while ensuring that the decisions we make will not put Canadians in difficulty, in spite of different points of views, including the views of distinguished Canadians with whom I don't agree. I think it's a strength for our country that we can have these different points of view. The government has been unequivocal on that.
Approach has been to rally international support to pressure China. What evidence, if any, do you have to tell Canadians and the families of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig that this is actually working?
Obviously, this is a long and difficult process for the families of Mr. Kovrig and Spavor. This is a frustrating situation for many Canadians, and we need to bring these Michaels home. That is why we are working extremely hard behind the scenes. We are working very clearly in public as well, rallying partners and allies around the world who continue to highlight to China their concern, not just the fact that they have arbitrarily detained two Canadians, but of course their concern that their country or their citizens could be next in this approach to putting pressure on foreign governments that China seems to have undertaken. This is a real concern upon which as a world, we need to continue to be united, and I am very pleased by the kind of support we've gotten from friends and allies and partners all around the world on this issue. I
believe that many countries in the world are concerned not only by the fate of the two Michaels, but because of the precedent that this might mean that their own citizens will be detained in the future. So they are very clearly rejecting this kind of approach from China. They are signaling their concern about what China has done. We thank them for standing with us and for their solidarity in standing against China.
Magnitsky Act sanctions, also revoking student visas for Chinese students studying here. It's been more than 550 days that these two men have been detained. What are you waiting for to get tougher with China?
From the very beginning of our first mandate 5 years ago, as a government, we increased significantly our efforts around Canadians detained abroad. We have, over the past 5 years, shown significant success in a range of cases in many different countries. We have established processes, some public, some private and diplomatic behind the scenes, that maximize our chances of bringing these Canadians in difficulty home. We will continue to do the things that are necessary, but as I said, some of it is public, some of it is diplomatic and behind the scenes. I can assure Canadians that we are continuing to do everything that is maximizing our chances of bringing them home in the right way.
Ever since the beginning, ever since we came into power 5 years ago, we have, as a government, very seriously taken our responsibility of helping Canadians detained around the world very seriously. We have had a great deal of success over the past 5 years in bringing home Canadians in difficulty, and that has been through a combination of tactics, some public, some private, some diplomatic, some on the sidelines, in the wings, that have resulted in many Canadians being brought home. We will continue these efforts to help the two Michaels in the right way, and we remain optimistic that we'll bring them home. Thank you, everyone.
All right, Andrew Thompson with you again on CPAC. That was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at an Ottawa brewery seeking to